Hello and welcome to Gold and Silver Assets. I'm Diora and it's Sunday, the 5th of September 2020. I reckon fiat currency is the root cause of a lot of the problems that we see in society at the moment. Now, this might sound like a bit of a strange thing to say, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me. Let me explain. There are three main categories of money. Commodity money has its own intrinsic value, and gold is an example of this. Representative money represents something which has intrinsic value, but the representative money itself doesn't have any intrinsic value. So an example of this might be a gold certificate. The third category is fiat currency, which people have tried to call money. People have been trained to think of it as money. In fact, if you Google the words fiat currency, the top result calls it fiat money. If you were to ask a random person in the street the meaning of fiat, then I reckon the first thing that they'll probably think of is this. Yeah, this is the Italian car manufacturer. It's a sad fact of the matter that the majority of people don't understand what fiat currency is, let alone the consequences of it, even though it affects all of our lives in actually quite profound ways. Fiat currency is issued by the government, who made it legal tender by decree. It has no intrinsic value and is backed only by trust in the government and central bank that issued it. Probably the most important feature of fiat currency is the ability to supply it in unlimited amounts. Historically, no government has been able to resist the temptation of proliferating the currency supply, and eventually this leads to price inflation in some form or other. And this has the effect of encouraging people to have what's called a high time preference. That means that people are more focused on their well-being in the short term rather than the long term. In an inflationary environment, savers get punished, and so a spending mentality develops. There are more advantages to getting into debt compared to saving up. Nowadays, the affordability of debt is more measured by the ability to pay off the interest, and there's little consideration of the ability to pay off the actual principal. The availability of debt to enable immediate spending brings on consumption. It brings consumption forwards, basically. And that leads to the increasing desire for instant gratification. Conspicuous consumption becomes rife in society, and people go around flaunting their flashy possessions, competing with the Joneses. But these types of people are usually up to their eyeballs in debt with no significant savings. Their net worth is usually negative. In contrast, I reckon that the hard money types, with basically those people tend to have a low time preference, they tend to be the types who fly under the radar, and they don't feel the need to consume to impress or compete with others. When our currency can be printed in unlimited amounts, this provides an avenue through which the expansion of government can be funded easily without having to get taxpayer approval. In New Zealand, we have a term called lolly scramble. Lollies are what you call candy in the USA or sweeties in the UK. A lolly scramble is a kids' party game where an adult will throw fistfuls of lollies in the air, and then the children scramble around in a frenzy to try and get as many of the lollies as they can. And this is the term also used metaphorically to refer to government budgets and pre-election promises. With a blank cheque, governments indulge in profligate spending. So, for example, spending $400,000 for a piece of art during an emergency pandemic and placing that piece of art just to sit next to a lift for a government institution, well, that's an example of profligate spending. And the problem is there's no consequences to that. Yeah, there might be an article in the paper about it, but, there's no consequences. And that kind of thing just will happen increasingly. It's not like you can vote that kind of thing out. Contracts are often not negotiated to get the best value for money, and extravagant, wasteful spending occurs basically because cash is freely available to these institutions. Private businesses are subject to profit and loss accounting, and so they have to really stick to budgets. In practice, governments don't have such concerns in the fiat system, and so they're able to actually displace private businesses. Right now, we're seeing small and medium-sized independent enterprises, basically they're getting crushed. The ability to print unlimited currency enables the development of a welfare state. The number of beneficiaries grow over time, and this is fueled by the increasingly unstable ballooning of household debt. As welfare payments increase, employers are increasingly competing with the government for labour. Why work when you can get paid to sit at home? Again, this has a negative impact on private enterprises. People tend to take less and less responsibility for themselves and not only blame others for their problems, but also expect others to sort out their problems. Self-reliance and independence become rare in society. Having a blank checkbook enables governments to wage war more frequently. This chart shows how the number of wars has increased over the last century. Fiat currency also facilitates extended wars, which are expensive. This graphic shows how the duration of wars has steadily increased over time. So you can see that the shortest wars were in the 1800s, when the gold standard was being used. And of course, the duration has lengthened from less than a year, and the most recent one is now 19 years. Strangely, fiat currency also affects which careers flourish. Bureaucracy is probably the greatest beneficiary of this. The primary concern of bureaucratic institutions is to maximise their own budgets and power. This chart shows an example when it comes to healthcare. So since 1970, the number of doctors has maybe doubled. So that's shown in that maroon coloured part at the bottom there. But the number of health administrators has absolutely exploded, over 3,000% shown in yellow. That's pretty crazy. The other sectors that do well under fiat currency are those that hold government contracts. Sadly, this all comes at the expense of the things that are actually really valuable in society. There's a loss of skilled trades and much less entrepreneurship. A fiat system allows power and influence to fall into the hands of those who control the creation of the fiat currency, i.e. governments and central banks. The idea that monetary intervention paves the way for a tyrannical government goes back to the 14th century, so this is something that's been known for a long time. Under a hard money system, the government is financially dependent on its taxpayers. But under a fiat system, that's not the case. And that has far-reaching consequences. So as debts, deficits, and the currency all expand, the power of the citizens diminishes and democracy becomes a kind of illusion. Under a fiat system, the quality of goods deteriorates in three ways. Firstly, we see shrinkflation, where we pay the same for less. So here in New Zealand, we have a brand of bread called Vogel's, which is actually really nice when it's toasted. These loaves have shrunk a lot over the years, and now I've got a picture of a slice here, and the slice is about the size of the palm of my hand, and I have small lady hands. In fact, these slices are so small that it's actually quite a struggle to get out of the toaster when it's done. So I've put a ruler here next to my slice of Vogel's, and this is a normal sized dinner plate. So you can see that it's around 7 centimetres high. I always joke that pretty soon it's going to be the size of a postage stamp. The quality of materials used to make things also tends to deteriorate, so they tend to use cheaper materials. One example is back in 1995 in New Zealand, regulations were changed to allow the use of untreated timber to build houses. And this cheaper timber tends to rot much more quickly when wet. This was one of the factors that led to what's called the leaky homes debacle over here, where homes were literally rotting. And so here are some examples of rotting wood in the walls there. But I reckon even the quality of ingredients in food is steadily deteriorating. Third is the deterioration in the quality of the construction. So in a hard money system, I reckon things were built to last. Whereas in a fiat currency system, that seems to encourage short-term thinking, and this manifests in poor quality construction. So here's one of those memes that you find on the internet. So on one side, you've got the 2,000-year-old road built by Romans that's still around and still functioning very nicely. On the other side, you've got the state of a road. I'm not picking on Australians. I think that happens all over the world. Even here, there's a main road nearby, and they just seem to keep digging and resurfacing it. I think they've done it a few times each year now. As a result of all this, the things we buy break easily, and it's often cheaper just to replace them than to actually fix things. And I reckon products are usually made for planned obsolescence. Is style a victim of fiat currency? Now, lately, I reckon people either wear things that are obscenely tight or they're excessively baggy and ill-fitting. Even worse is when you see people wearing pyjamas outside. A supermodel might be able to get away with this as a kind of publicity stunt, but in real life, I'm not so sure. Apparently in some countries it's seen as a status symbol. So have a look at this guy. He's actually accessorized his outfit with a Louis Vuitton man bag. And for those cooler autumn days, the fleeced pyjama is just the ticket. I've seen people actually walking around in my neighbourhood wearing pyjamas. So this is actually a real life phenomenon. So what's this got to do with fiat currency? Well, I reckon it's to do again with short-term thinking. To me, it signifies sloppiness and a lack of respect for others. Now, look, I'm not saying everyone has to wear expensive clothes, but at least look half presentable when leaving the house. Look, I don't know if this really has anything to do much with fiat currency. I just stuck it in because it bugs me. And finally, we come to the topic of art, which is something that we've talked about before. Let's look at the example of Michelangelo, who lived under a hard currency standard. And he clearly had a low time preference. It took him 4 years to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and he was paid 3,000 ducats, which is around 335 ounces of gold. He would have spent hours and hours lying on his back on rickety scaffolding, and his arms would no doubt have been aching. This is back-breaking work, and it's also the product of a high level of skill and mastery, and the result has endured centuries. In the fiat era, art is less about skill and workmanship in general. Now, I'm not saying all art is like that at the moment, but this is a generalization. I think art nowadays seems to be more about marketing and making a statement. The latest craze is NFT art, and here's an NFT rock that some sucker bought for $251,000. Now, I'd argue that the creation of the art itself required minimal skills and probably took all of 10 minutes to knock up, and I'm probably being generous there. A century from now, I doubt anyone will be gazing at this with awe. In conclusion, fiat currencies encourage short-term thinking, which has far-reaching effects not only on finance, but also politics and culture. And I believe this explains a lot of the crazy things that are going on these days. Currently, the whole world is on a fiat standard. And so all the behaviours and effects that I've mentioned are occurring globally. I don't think there's anywhere for those with a hard money type personality to escape to. So I guess all we can do is understand the direction that things are going and make the best of it. I often wonder, what would it be like living under a deflationary currency system? Now, that's actually a really tough one because it's something that has never, ever existed before as far as I know. But surely it can't be worse than a fiat system. Next up, the market update. Let's start with gold priced in US dollars on the weekly scale, and this is still looking very nice. We've got 3 consecutive green weekly candles after this lovely long lower wick over here. So I think that's looking pretty good. Not much really in this market report, not much really has changed compared to my analysis last week, but we'll still talk about it anyway. So here I've been talking about the 1860 level over here, which has been important in a couple of ways. First of all, the pitchfork midline kind of seems to be in that area as well. And we've got this trend line coming down here as well. So that's, I think, the area to look out for. So potentially I'm thinking coming up through here, and look, I think a knockback is likely at that point. The question is, how strong of a knockback is it going to be? Is this over here going to provide sufficient support to allow it to go up here, or are we going to just go down, down, and then up again? And the worst case scenario is if we break through this floor here. So there's a few possibilities, but I'm thinking at least we're going to reach up to 1860. What happens after there is tricky, but I think we're either going to go straight through, or more likely we're going to get knocked back partially and then come back up. I'm not sure that this is going to be dragged out for another 2-3 months. I mean, it's possible, but I just really like this lower candle wick here, and even on the monthly scale, it's quite an impressive candle. So it's a candle that looks like this there. So there's not even much of a body to speak of there, and so that's very bullish on the monthly scale as well. So this month we would need to see a green candle above there to confirm follow through there. Silver in US dollars on the daily scale, So I had another look at this, and what I've done here is I've joined these two high points here and these two low points here. So we kind of have a broadening pattern here, and prices moved up very nicely. We had a very nice Friday, didn't we? So that was about an over 3% move there. So that's looking nice as well. Is that the bottom in? Hard to say, but look, I think this is looking quite promising. We're up to this trend line here. If we can break through there, then we're looking at a target of 28 again. So we're going to hopefully have another bash at that. And this time it does have the potential to break through because it's hit that so many times going back if you look on the weekly scale. But first of all, of course, we've got to actually get to that point. Last time we were looking at the distance of price from the 200-day moving average, and what I've done here is join the highs over here, and according to this has broken out. So the question is that an early sign of a breakout above here? So that'll be interesting to see. We'll look at that prospectively, but I think that's looking quite positive there as well. This is a very nice strong green candle as well. So yeah, I'm thinking there, but of course it's not going to go directly there. It's going to go up a bit. Probably it will get knocked back between around 25 and 25.50. So it could come back and retest before moving back up. Gold miners, again, not much new. What I've done here is draw a parallel channel. So I've joined these two lows here and then brought the channel up to touch this high over here. And so what happens when we get that is that you see that this midline is respected quite nicely here. And what's happened here on Friday is that we broke up above that midline. Now we are going to encounter some resistance above here, and that's because of all the price action over here and over here. And so that gives us resistance at around 34 to 35 over here. So yeah, there could be a little bit more upside, but again, a knockback is likely at one of those levels. So either at 34 or around 35 level over there. That's what I'm thinking. But overall, I mean, we can't really say that we're in an uptrend yet because we would need to break this high. So we'd need to get above 36 to say that. But at the moment, look, I mean, potentially this could be a double bottom. But for that pattern to be confirmed, we would have to get above, just above 40 over here before we can say that is the case. But the potential's there. And finally, we've got the junior silver miners. So the SILJ on the daily scale. And again, a pretty similar picture here. Not much new to report, but this price action is looking quite nice. It's steady upwards movement there. And we just hit the 14 level over here. Again, we have to admit that we are still in this downtrend, and for that to be confirmed as a reversal, we need to get above this level here. But yeah, I mean with these, again, the potential is here that we can move up and then get knocked back before proceeding upwards, in which case there's a potential for a inverse head and shoulders there. But of course, this is all conjecture here. I don't know if that's going to happen. So yeah, not a huge amount of change from what I was talking about last week. But yeah, I think there's still a bit more upwards movement to go, but do expect some knockbacks along the way. Right, that's it from me. So yeah, a couple of days ago here in New Zealand, we had a cyber attack which caused quite a significant number of people to have their internet knocked out. I think it's something like 15% of internet users had lost their internet access. So that just got me thinking. Look, I'm pretty diligent at doing these videos, but if there comes a day where you don't see a video uploaded, it probably means something or other has happened. It might be we've had a power cut, internet outage, or you can let your imagination run with you. So, yeah, just to let you know about that, weird things are going on everywhere, aren't they? Well, anyway, have a good week. All the best. See you next week. Bye.